What's up everyone, it's Shane from Maximum Quality Content here. Now, unsurprisingly, I enjoyed the ever-loving crap out of Godzilla -1. How it was shot, how it was acted, how, I don't know, bloody everything about the film worked. Still astounds me. It's a bloody amazing film. One of the greatest Godzilla films, or hell, even one of the greatest kaiju films out there in recent memory. Though I'm sure no one's surprised to hear me give that take at this point, considering there's like a million reviews on the film out on YouTube right now. So instead of making a super ultra mega late review, which is not my fault because they released it just last week so I couldn't see it until now, but still, I decided it would be better to cut right through to the meat and potatoes and give you 10 reasons why -1 rules. Starting with number 1, the acting. One of the highlights of the film is definitely the main cast, who all deliver a great performance and actually make the human characters engaging to watch, and their story fulfilling right until the end. Of course, the most noteworthy being, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, I'm not Japanese, Kamiki Ryunosuke as Koichi and Minami Hamabe as Noriko. Two actors myself and most likely everyone else was majorly impressed by, given their amazing performance that will take the wind out of your sails. Thanks to their performance, the relationship between Koichi and Noriko really works and it's pulled off amazingly because they're sort of circumstantial lovers, in a sense. Like, they find each other by pure circumstance and are forced into this horrible situation where, on top of all the destruction around them, they now have to take care of a child. Being in that nightmare scenario naturally brings the two closer together, with Noriko acting as Koichi's emotional crutch and prime motivator for his actions later on in the film. The only actor I actually recognised was Sakura Ando, who takes on a sort of motherly caring role for Koichi and Noriko's child as they're away at work. A role that really gives the character new light and new reason to continue living even in this horrible situation, which we can really see bear fruit with just her impression of Koichi starting from the beginning of the film to the end, which changes almost completely. I mean, to be honest, she's becoming one of my favourite actors after watching Shoplifters and 100 Yen Love, and you know, just another performance to add to the list of great performances, so what can I say, amazing. Moving on. Number 2, -1 claps back at woke Hollywood. Okay, I'm just kidding. If any stupid YouTube reviewers say that, if any YouTubers use -1 as an argument to attack Hollywood, then they're dumb, and I do not agree with that, so yes, I am in fact joking. Let's -1 this entry. Forget I said anything. Moving on. Number 2, post-World War II setting. Now, this film actually takes place earlier than the OG film, with, you know, the original Godzilla taking place in 1954, while this movie takes place literally right after World War II ends, in 1945 onwards. Because of that shorter time gap from the end of the war to the events of the film, the impact World War II had on Japan is definitely felt way harder throughout this film compared to the original. Not to slate the original, of course, but it's really pulled off successfully in -1. As Tokyo is already in a state of rubble by the time Koichi gets home, and we get to see it slowly rebuild to a fraction of what it once was, only to be taken down by Godzilla, reinforcing the sort of grim tone this movie has throughout, which eventually improves towards the end, but it's sort of bittersweet. While -1 does go back to its roots with the setting being post-World War II Japan, it's more like a fresh take on familiar territory, which is really felt with the core themes that both movies present. Whereas the original attacked the danger of continued nuclear research and technology, and its potential threat to Japan and the world at large, -1 takes a different approach, exploring the faults of institutions and internal relations with the actions of the Japanese government, hesitating to act despite the large threat they face because of their relations with the United States, and the increasing tensions between the United States and the USSR, putting not only them but even Japan on edge, eventually forcing private citizens of Japan to action, to face the looming threat that the government should be dealing with but refuses to. Number 3, the soundtrack. I mean, going to the cinemas and hearing Godzilla's theme blast on the loudspeakers is a feeling that everyone should at least experience once in their life. I mean, it sent shivers down my spine, even despite the fact that I'd heard it so many times beforehand. It's only helped by the clever timing that the theme is played, right as Godzilla attacks his first city, his first big rampage of the movie. And it's not just Godzilla's theme, we also hear the classic Japanese military theme that is also from the original. While being nostalgic and harkening back to the original, it's also just amazingly used in its own right because it's played during the scene where the private citizens are facing Godzilla, not the Japanese government or any other military institution. Which sort of takes the old theme and sort of makes it its own, if that makes sense. Like, this is the theme of the people, not the government, which I think is really cool. But even past the remixes, the original soundtrack for the movie is just really good. The piece really sticking out to me being Koichi's theme while he's in the airplane, which goes do do dun do do dun do do dun do do dun. It's only 3 beats, but it builds tension so well. Number 4, callbacks to the original film. While I've already mentioned the soundtrack and how it's just the old themes used in different contexts, there's also plenty of other references outside of that harken back to the original film well, and in every context it's used in effective. Some of these include Godzilla appearing on Odo Island and being a sort of mythical legend to the locals in the area. The ocean being Godzilla's point of origin, which eventually emerges from not only to attack people on the boats, but also later on Japan itself, and also Godzilla chowing down on a train carriage. And while these callbacks to the original 1954 classic work, some of them are actually pulled off more effectively than they were in the original. For example, Godzilla chowing down on the train carriage, it's lingered on a lot longer in -1 than it is in the original film. And it helps that one of the main characters are actually in the train carriage trying to survive the attack, making the stakes of the whole scene way higher. The only problem I had with it is that one shot Noriko is hanging from the train and it looks like it's about hundreds of miles down, and then when she actually falls down it's like a short drop. Minor inconsistency, just a nitpick really. Number 5, Koichis Dynamic with Godzilla. Koichi is sort of indirectly responsible for Godzilla's attacks. I say indirectly because at the start of the movie, Godzilla appears on Odo Island like he does in the original film, but he's much smaller in size. Koichi is commanded to attack Godzilla by using the guns on his plane, but he doesn't because he's too scared. A common theme with the character, as he also abandons his duty as a kamikaze pilot due to fear of, death. At the same time, would that have worked? Would Godzilla have actually taken any damage from those guns? We don't know. Probably not. But the fact there was potential to stop Godzilla haunts Koichi throughout the rest of the movie, taking a heavy toll on him mentally as he starts to even question the reality around him. Is any of this real, or are these just the last visions of a dying man? Questions Koichi poses to himself in a confused haze, emphasizing the movie's main theme of survivor's guilt, which we'll touch on later. When it comes to Godzilla, it's sort of like Koichi's internal guilt made real, made manifest. It's a gigantic living, breathing form of consequences due to Koichi's actions. And the fact that he always happens to find himself in these terrifying Godzilla attacks, he never gets killed, which only adds to his feeling of self-blame and worthlessness. Number 6, strays from typical kaiju tropes. Now, if you've watched a lot of kaiju movies, they usually take sort of a more, I don't want to say light-hearted, but I mean, compared to -1, I would say light-hearted tone. Especially the older classics from the 1950s and 1960s, with later Godzilla films and the early Gamera Showa movies. It's because of that light-hearted tone that the stakes aren't really there, because it's meant for a younger audience and you know that the heroes are going to win, or the kaiju themselves is a hero, which is not really a bad thing. It works for those movies. They're meant to be feel-good experiences and just an entertaining joyride. And do I really have to say this? I mean, -1 is the complete opposite of that. -1 has an overbearing tone of misery, thanks to post-war Japan, and on top of that, Godzilla attacking Japan. But don't get me wrong, it's not just a 2-hour misery fest. There are moments of relief and joy, and the ending ultimately pays off and feels like a satisfying conclusion for Koichi that isn't totally nihilistic. Other kaiju movies tend to have a less emphasis on human characters, with scenes being dominated by scientists that are just trying to explain what is happening in the movie and why it's happening. That's why so many people get turned off by kaiju movies, because while the humans are there, they're mainly just an outlet to further talk about and explore the monsters. That's not the case with -1 though. The film has a small cast, of which you could probably count on one hand the most notable members, and I think it pays off because of that. Instead of having constant boardrooms of nameless scientists that are just naming off countless details about the monsters, we get to explore a tight-knit group of characters who are all interesting and worth exploring and are intriguing in their own right. Number 7. The theme of survivor's guilt. Man, saying they did it justice would be a huge understatement. Almost immediately, the movie establishes that Koichi is a character dominated by fear, allowing it to motivate his actions and decisions, which is why he fled his post as a kamikaze pilot. Only this put him into a situation where he could have potentially fought off Godzilla and chose not to, resulting in the death of those innocent mechanics. Due to this, Koichi starts hating the fact that he's still alive, but his fear of death keeps him going. His mentality starts to change as soon as he meets Noriko, eventually confiding in her when he finally admits his guilt, and she starts to begin helping him through it. Literally the next day, Koichi awakes to a scene of Noriko and Akiko just having wholesome family times, and this gives him a reason to live. To keep going, not just for himself, but because 2 other people in his life are now dependent on him. It's what makes Noriko's supposed death during the Ginza attack so heartfelt, as it calls his arc of improvement into question. Does he want to live, especially after what just happened? That question lingers right until the end of the movie, which is what makes his final choice such a satisfying and tearful payoff. Number 8. The Ginza attack scene. I mean, holy smokes, this is one of the best destruction scenes in a kaiju movie, period. Almost everything about it works, from the soundtrack I mentioned earlier, which plays Godzilla's classic theme as he begins stomping through the city, and the part where Godzilla starts trying to eat the train carriage. Not only just because it's a harken back to the original movie, but because in and of itself is just really well done. You can tell that they built a whole platform that could tip over on its side with a green screen in the background, and it just looks really well done. It's an amazing example of cinematography, and the whole time it's held at just a mid shot at one side of the carriage as we see Noriko experience this bloody disaster. But quite possibly the best part of the scene is the aftermath. Unlike prior Godzilla affairs, this atomic breath takes a lot of time to charge, and the whole time your spine is shivering with tension. I mean, you know what's going to happen, but everyone's helpless to stop it, and you just have to begrudgingly watch it take place. Seeing the only connection Koichi had to the rest of the world just be severed, and how it utterly destroys him as all he can do is just scream out helplessly. I mean, the first time you watch that, it takes your breath away. I mean, it might just be me, but it feels like Godzilla almost looks back at Koichi in this scene. I obviously can't show it here because the full movie's not out yet, but we see Godzilla doing a slight tilt back to Koichi before roaring his head off. As I said, it might just be me, but if it was intentional, man, that is some attention to detail right there. Almost mocking the fact that he's still breathing and that yet another person died in his place. Number 9, it breaks down cultural and genre-related barriers. Now, what I mean by this is that it manages to connect with a much larger audience outside of Japan, and outside of the kaiju genre in general. I went to see this movie twice, both with a different group of people, most of which had never seen a kaiju movie before, and they actually ended up really enjoying it. It struck a chord with them, it managed to connect with them, even though it's a foreign language film and a monster movie to add on top of that. A genre that is usually a hard sell for most people, given the fact that general audiences tend to have a harder time taking that genre seriously due to the main emphasis on, giant monsters and the lack of emphasis on human characters. Something this movie flips on its head, and probably a large part of as to how it appeals to a much larger audience. Despite having everything stacked against it, this movie can be enjoyed by literally everyone, and that's just an amazing accomplishment in and of itself. And last, but certainly not least, number 10, it's Godzilla. Yeah, I mean, duh. It's a big monster movie and it has Godzilla in it, so, it's gonna be at least somewhat good, right? Okay, look, Godzilla's been around for 70 years at this point, having almost 40 movies to his name. You can probably count on one hand how many of them are actually terrible and unwatchable. And even then, there's still some debate as to the quality of those movies. People like Godzilla so much because he's so malleable. It doesn't matter what premise or tone or genre you put him in, he can work and adjust to anything. And -1 is a clear case of that. With the recent MonsterVerse films like Godzilla vs Kong and now the new Godzilla x Kong, he's definitely taking a more blockbuster, action-packed, sort of, how would you call it, superhero-ish, light-hearted tone. Obviously there's still stakes, but it feels more like a superhero movie than a serious period drama about the impacts of war. And yet -1 still succeeds with flying colours, thus showing it doesn't matter what situation you put Godzilla in, he's always going to work somehow, and he's always going to be awesome. That's why I'm a fan of the series after all. There you go, there's 10 reasons why Godzilla -1 rules. Thanks for watching. Like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, subscribe for more quality content, and I'll see you guys next time.
Have some more chicken, have some more pie, have some more chicken, have some more pie, have some more chicken, have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Have some more chicken, have some more pie, have some more chicken, have some more pie, have some more chicken, have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried.